The enemy commander, who called himself the Wolf of the Mountains, raised one gloved hand and ordered his fighters to hold their fire. He wanted the wounded American to bleed slowly. Through his scope, he watched Corporal Mason Reed drag himself across the rocks toward the rifle he had dropped, and he laughed. "Let them watch him, D," he said to the men beside him. "Let them learn what happens up here." He believed nothing down in that ravine could stop him. He was wrong. He never once imagined that the person who would end his night was a woman who had never fired a single shot in real combat. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something simple. If this kind of story moves you, please take 1 second to subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end, because this one only gets more powerful as it goes. And do me a favor, leave a comment and tell me what city you are watching from tonight, because I love seeing how far these stories travel and who is out there listening. Now let the story begin. Nobody at Forward Operating Base Liberty ever expected Sergeant Evelyn Carter to become the person who saved an elite SEAL team. And if you had said it out loud in the mess hall one morning, half the soldiers would have laughed into their coffee, because everybody knew Evelyn as the woman behind the numbers. She was 25 years old, an Army logistics specialist, and her whole world was a computer screen full of inventory reports, ammunition counts, fuel logs, spare parts, boot sizes. She tracked every rifle magazine and every ration crate that came onto that base and everyone that left it. She never led a mission. She never walked into a combat zone. Her battlefield was a folding desk, a laptop that ran too hot, and a stack of clipboards that never seemed to shrink. And she was good at it. Better than good. Carter, her supervisor, said one morning, dropping a fresh stack of paperwork in front of her. "Supply says we are short 40 rounds from last week's transfer. Can you find where they went before I have to write it up?" Evelyn did not even look up from her screen. "You are not short 40 rounds," she said. "You are short 38, and they did not go anywhere. Somebody logged 2 crates under the wrong requisition code on Tuesday. Check the code that ends in 914. It is in there." Her supervisor stared at her. Then he went and checked, and she was right down to the last 2 rounds. That was Evelyn Carter. She could hold thousands of numbers in her head at once. She could feel when something was off, the way other people felt a change in the weather. A misplaced decimal, a crate counted twice, a signature that did not match. She noticed the mistakes that everyone else walked right past. But here is what almost nobody understood about her. Evelyn was not obsessed with numbers. She was obsessed with precision, and those are 2 very different things. She had grown up in a small town in Wyoming, the kind of place where the wind never really stops, and the winters test what a family is made of. Her father had been a mechanic, a big quiet man with grease under his fingernails and more patience than the whole town put together. Until the accident. She was 12 when it happened. A hydraulic lift came down wrong and crushed most of the bones in his right hand and part of his arm. He never worked as a mechanic again. And the thing that stayed with Evelyn, the thing she carried into adulthood, was not the injury. It was the way her father refused to let it make him bitter. "Evie," he told her one night, sitting at the kitchen table flexing what was left of his hand, "you want to know the difference between people who make it and people who fall apart? It is not luck. It is not money. It is this. If a thing is worth doing, you give it everything you have got. Every single time. No half measures. You hear me?" "I hear you, Dad," she said. "Say it back to me." "If it is worth doing, it deserves everything I have got." He nodded, satisfied. "So I can name..." Now you never forget that. She never did. They never had much. Some winters they had to choose between the heating bill and a proper Christmas, and Christmas usually lost. But her father gave her something that turned out to be worth more than money. He gave her the belief that how you do the small things is how you do everything. So when Evelyn joined in the Army and the recruiters saw her scores and her attention to detail, they slotted her straight into logistics. And she accepted it. She told herself that was who she was, a support soldier, the one who counted the bullets, not the one who fired them. She believed that for a long time, until one man refused to let her keep believing it. His name was Master Sergeant Caleb Whitmore. He was a retired Army marksman who had come back to work as a civilian instructor, running the shooting range at the base and training soldiers who needed it. He was somewhere north of 60, with a gray mustache and eyes that missed absolutely nothing, and he had a reputation for being hard to impress. Evelyn met him because of a clipboard of all things. She came out to the range one afternoon to do an equipment count on the weapons and the ammunition stored in the range locker. Routine, in and out. She had done it a dozen times. But this time Whitmore watched her work. He watched the way she moved down the row of rifles, the way she checked each serial number against her list, the way she did not just glance at things, she truly looked at them. And when a young private on the firing line kept jerking the trigger and missing the target completely, Evelyn, without thinking, without even realizing she was doing it, murmured under her breath, "He is anticipating the recoil. He is flinching before the shot goes off." Whitmore heard her. "Say that again," he said. Evelyn looked up startled. "Sorry, Master Sergeant. I did not mean to. It is not my place." "I did not ask you whose place it was. I asked you to say it again." She hesitated. "He is flinching. He knows the kick is coming, so his whole body tenses up right before he pulls the trigger. That is why his shots keep going low and left." Whitmore folded his arms and studied her for a long moment. "That is exactly right. Most soldiers who have been shooting for years cannot see that. How long have you been shooting?" "I have never shot at all, Master Sergeant, not once." He raised an eyebrow. "Never." "No, sir, I am logistics. I count them. I do not fire them." And Caleb Whitmore did something then that would change the entire course of her life. He smiled, not a big smile, just a small knowing pull at the corner of his mouth, the smile of a man who has just found something valuable in a place nobody thought to look. "Sergeant Carter," he said, reading her name off her uniform. "Come see me tomorrow, same time." "Master Sergeant, I really do not think I—" That was not a request, Carter. That was an invitation. There is a difference, and you are smart enough to know it. Tomorrow, same time. And then he turned back to his flinching private, leaving Evelyn standing there with her clipboard and a strange uneasy feeling in her chest. She almost did not go back. She told herself all the reasons it made no sense. She was a logistics specialist. She had a job to do. She was not a shooter she had never wanted to be, and the whole idea of picking up a rifle felt like stepping into someone else's life. She lay awake that night, turning it over, and by morning, she had half convinced herself to send Whitmore a polite message, saying she was too busy. But something stopped her. 2 days earlier, she had been at the base clinic dropping off supply forms when the medevac helicopter came in. She had watched the combat medics carry a wounded soldier off the bird, a young man not much older than her, his uniform soaked dark, his face the color of ash. She had watched them fight for him right there on the tarmac, hands moving fast, voices sharp and controlled. And she had stood there frozen, useless. Just a woman with a clipboard watching other people do the thing that actually mattered. She could not stop thinking about it. So she went back to the range. Whitmore was waiting for her, and he did not waste time. He put an unloaded rifle in her hands and started with the absolute basics. How to hold it, where to put her cheek against the stock, how to breathe, how to think. The rifle is not the thing that makes a marksman, he told her. Any fool can pull a trigger. The rifle is just a tool. The real weapon is up here. He tapped the side of his own head. It is your ability to stay calm when everything in your body is screaming at you to panic. Most people cannot do that. Can you? I do not know, Evelyn said honestly. Good answer, Whitmore said. The ones who tell me they can usually cannot. Now, breathe in, slow, breathe out, slower. And on the pause at the bottom of that breath, that little moment of stillness, that is when you belong to the shot. She listened. She always listened. And when Whitmore finally handed her live rounds and let her fire for the first time, what happened next honestly surprised even him. She was not spectacular that first day. Nobody is. But she was steady. She did not flinch. She did not close her eyes. She did not fight the rifle. She held that same stillness she brought to a column of numbers, and she put round after round in a tight little cluster, and by the end of the session, Whitmore was quiet in a way that told her something had shifted. Twice a week, when he said finally, you come to me twice a week and you do not tell anybody, not yet. Why not? Because if the wrong people find out too soon what you might be, they will start pushing you before you are ready, and I am not going to let anybody rush this. You understand me? She did not fully understand, not then, but she nodded, so it began. Twice a week in the hours she was off duty, Evelyn Carter walked out to the range and became someone her fellow soldiers would not have recognized. And the more she trained, the more Whitmore saw what he had suspected from that very first afternoon. She was not a natural because she was aggressive. She was the opposite of aggressive. She was not reckless. She was not hungry for glory. She had no fantasy of being a hero. What made her rare was something quieter and much harder to teach. She was patient, almost impossibly patient. Whitmore ran her through drills designed to break a shooter's focus. He shouted at her. He clapped his hands right beside her ear at the worst possible moment. He made her hold a position until her arms trembled and her legs went numb. He did everything he could think of to rattle her, and she just would not rattle. "You are a hard woman to distract, Carter," he said one afternoon, shaking his head. "I have trained infantry. I have trained special operators. And I am telling you, I have met maybe 3 people in 40 years who can hold their center the way you do. Where does that come from?" Evelyn lowered the rifle and thought about it. "My dad," she said, "he used to say the small things are the big things. If you rush the small things, you rush every big them. So I guess I just learned to slow down and get it right." Whitmore nodded slowly. "Your dad was a wise man. He still is." "Good. Hold on to that." But there was something Whitmore was starting to worry about, and it took him a while to put his finger on it. It was not her skill. Her skill was extraordinary, and it was growing every single week. It was something in her eyes and the way she carried herself that told him she still did not believe any of this was real. She still thought of herself as the woman behind the numbers who happened to be pretty good at target practice. She had no idea what she actually was. And Whitmore knew from long and painful experience that the day always comes when a person like Evelyn is forced to find out. "Let me tell you something, Carter," he said to her one evening as the light was fading and the range was empty, except for the two of them. "And I need you to really hear it, not just nod at me like you do. I do not just nod at you. You absolutely just nod at me. But listen, your job title does not decide what you are capable of. You hear me? A patch on your shoulder, a code in a database, that is not who you are. That is just where the Army decided to put you. But there is going to come a moment, and I cannot tell you when, where the title falls away, and there is only you and what you can do. And when that moment comes, everyone around you is going to depend on it." Evelyn frowned. "You are being awfully dramatic for a Tuesday Master Sergeant." He did not laugh. He looked at her with an expression she had not seen on him before, something almost sad. "I have buried men I trained, Carter. Good men. And every single time I found myself wishing I had said the important things while I still had the chance. So I am saying it to you now while I have the chance. Are you listening?" The teasing left her voice. "I am listening. You are more than the numbers. Whether you ever believe it or not, it is true. And one day you are going to have to act like it, ready or not." She did not know what to say to that. So she just said, "Okay, Whitmore." "Okay," he echoed, and he almost let it go at that. But then he added something quietly, almost to himself. "I just hope when it comes, you are as ready as I think you are." Evelyn drove back to her quarters that night with those words sitting heavy in her chest, and she could not shake them loose. Because the thing she had never admitted to anyone, not even to Whitmore, was that a part of her was terrified of exactly what he was describing. A part of her had started training not because she wanted to protect people, but because she needed to know. She needed to know whether the woman she saw in the mirror was really just a clerk, or whether there was something else underneath, something she had spent her whole life being too afraid to look at. And every week that she got better, that question got louder. What kind of person am I really? She did not know yet, but she was about to find out sooner and harder than she ever imagined. Because while Evelyn was learning to breathe through a rifle scope, half a world away in the cold mountains of Afghanistan, an enemy weapons network was growing. Crates of arms moving under the cover of darkness. A man building something out there that the intelligence officers back at Liberty were watching with growing alarm. The reports crossed Evelyn's desk before she even understood what she was looking at. That was the strange part. As a logistics specialist, she saw the patterns before most of the combat planners did. She noticed the unusual movements. She flagged a series of supply anomalies that, when she connected them, painted a picture of something big and dangerous being assembled in the mountains. "Carter," her supervisor said one morning, holding up the report she had submitted. "This analysis you attached, where did you get this?" "I did not get it anywhere. I just noticed the numbers did not add up the way they should. If somebody is moving that much material through that region, they are building a hub a storage and distribution point. It is the only thing that makes the pattern work. Her supervisor stared at the paper, then at her. You need to brief this. Today. And so without knowing it, Evelyn Carter helped set in motion the very mission that would test everything Whitmore had ever told her. They called it Operation Iron Shadow, a nighttime raid to find and destroy the enemy weapons network hidden in the mountains. And the unit assigned to carry it out was an elite SEAL team led by a lieutenant named Ryan Mitchell, the kind of men who did not need help from a logistics specialist, or so everyone assumed. Because here's the thing the planners quickly realized. A mission that complex, deep in hostile terrain, would need someone who understood the supply and equipment side cold. Someone who could manage emergency resources, track what the team carried in, and what they would need to get out and stay clear, headed under pressure while doing it. They needed someone from logistics. The request came down to Evelyn's unit, and the room got quiet because nobody wanted it. Going into the field with a SEAL team on a night raid was not a logistics job anybody had signed up for. It was dangerous, and it was far outside the comfort of a folding desk and a laptop that ran too hot. The officer looked around the room. I need a volunteer who knows the supply picture on this operation inside and out. Anybody. Silence. And then, to the shock of everyone in that room, and honestly to the shock of Evelyn herself, her hand went up. She did not decide to raise it. That was the strangest thing. It was as if her hand rose on its own, driven by something she had been carrying since the day she watched those medics fight for that ashen-faced boy on the tarmac. Some part of her that had been waiting quietly for a chance to answer the question she could not stop asking. The officer blinked. Carter. Yes, sir. I built a supply picture on this operation. I know it better than anyone. It should be me. You understand what you are volunteering for. This is not a warehouse. This is enemy territory. I understand, sir. He held her gaze for a moment, looking for hesitation, and found none. All right, he said slowly. It is your call to make. God help you, Carter. She walked out of that room with her heart pounding and her hands cold, wondering what on earth she had just done. She went straight to the range. She had to. Whitmore was locking up for the evening when she found him, and he took one look at her face and set down his keys. What happened? He said, not a question. He already knew something had. I volunteered, she said, for a mission, a real one. Iron Shadow. I am going out with a SEAL team into the field, and I do not know why I did it, and I think I might have just made the worst mistake of my life. Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised her. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, battered notebook. The cover was worn soft with age, the corners rounded from decades of being carried in pockets. She had seen it before. It never left him. Take this, he said, and held it out to her. Evelyn stared at it. Whitmore, no. That is yours. That is everything you. That is exactly why I want you to have it. 40 years, Carter. Everything I ever learned about surviving is in that book. Not about being a hero. I do not have a single word in there about glory, because glory gets people killed. It is about staying alive and keeping the people next to you alive. Take it. She took it. Her hands were shaking, and she hated that they were. I am scared, she admitted. It was the first time she had said it out loud to anyone. Good, Whitmore said gently. You would be a fool not to be. Fear is not the problem, Carter. Fear keeps you sharp. The problem is what you do with it. You let it freeze you, you die. You let it focus you, you live. And you, of all the people I have ever trained, you were born to let it focus you. You do not know that. I do know that. I have watched you for months. I have thrown everything I have at you, and I have never once seen you break. You want to know the truth. I am not worried about whether you can do this. I have never been worried about that. He paused, and his voice dropped. I am worried about after, about what it costs you, because it is going to cost you something. It always does. Evelyn did not understand what he meant. Not yet. She would. Listen to me, Whitmore said, and he put both hands on her shoulders, something he had never done before. When you get out there and the noise starts and everything goes wrong, and it will go wrong because it always does, I want you to hear my voice. Not the shouting, not the chaos. My voice. Control your breathing. Trust your training. And remember that the moment comes when everyone depends on you, whether you feel ready or not. When it comes, do not think about whether you deserve to be the one. Just be the one. She nodded, and this time she was not just nodding at him. This time she truly heard it deep down where it counted. "Come back and give me my notebook," Whitmore said, stepping back, his voice rough. "You hear me? That is an order. You do not get to keep it. You bring it back to me yourself." "Yes, Master Sergeant," she whispered. The night before she deployed, Evelyn could not sleep. She sat on the edge of her bunk with Whitmore's notebook open in her lap, reading his cramped handwriting by the light of a small lamp. Page after page of hard-won wisdom. Little diagrams, reminders, warnings written in the shorthand of a man who had learned every one of these lessons the hard way. And near the back, on a page by itself, one line underlined twice. "The job you were given is not the same as the job that will be asked of you. Be ready for both." She read that line a dozen times. She thought about her father flexing his ruined hand at the kitchen table. "If it is worth doing, it deserves everything you have got." She thought about the medics on the tarmac and the boy the color of ash. She thought about Whitmore and the sadness in his eyes when he talked about the men he had buried. And she thought about herself, the woman behind the numbers, who was about to walk into a place where all her careful columns and clean spreadsheets would mean absolutely nothing. She did not know, sitting there in the dark, that in a matter of days she would be crouched on a rock face in the mountains of Afghanistan with an enemy commander's fighters closing in from three sides. She did not know that a SEAL sniper named Mason Reed would fall and his rifle would clatter down onto the rocks and go silent. She did not know that a lieutenant named Ryan Mitchell would scream two words into the chaos, two words that would change the way an entire team understood the meaning of courage. Rifle now. She did not know any of that yet. All she knew, sitting there in the dark with an old man's notebook in her lap and her heart beating too fast, was that she had spent her whole life being told who she was. A support soldier, a clerk, the woman who counted the bullets other people fired. And some quiet, stubborn part of her, the part that had inherited her father's refusal to break, whispered back that maybe, just maybe, they had all been wrong. She closed the notebook. She turned off the lamp. She lay down in the dark, and Sergeant Evelyn Carter, who was never supposed to hold a rifle, closed her eyes and waited for the mission that would show her exactly who she really was. The convoy that carried Evelyn Carter to the staging airfield left before dawn, and for the whole ride she kept one hand pressed flat against the breast pocket of her uniform, where Whitmore's notebook sat against her heart like a second pulse. She did not talk much on the way. There was a young corporal beside her in the transport who tried to make conversation, the nervous kind of chatter men use to fill a silence that scares them. But Evelyn only answered in single words until he gave up. She was not being cold. She was somewhere else entirely. She was running through everything Whitmore had ever taught her, one lesson at a time, the way she used to run through supply manifests in her head before an inspection. Breathe in slow, breathe out slower, belong to the shot. The job you were given is not the same as the job that will be asked of you. She had no idea how soon those words would come due. When she reached the forward staging point, the SEALs were already there. And the moment she walked into that briefing tent, she felt every eye in the room land on her and then one by one dismiss her. She knew that look. She had spent her whole career being looked at that way. "That's the logistics element," one of the operators said, not even bothering to lower his voice. "They sent us a supply clerk." "Easy, Kowalski," said another voice, deeper, calmer. And that was how Evelyn first met Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell. He was not what she expected. She had built a picture in her mind of some towering, granite-jawed warrior who would treat her like furniture. Mitchell was lean and quiet, and he had tired eyes, the eyes of a man who had made too many decisions that kept him awake. He crossed the tent and put out his hand. "Sergeant Carter," he said, "you're the one who flagged the supply pattern? The one that put us onto the hub?" Evelyn shook his hand. "Yes, sir. That was good work. Real good. Half my planning came off your analysis." He studied her for a moment, and she braced for the doubt she was sure was coming. But instead, he just said, "You know why you're really here? To manage the emergency supply picture, sir. Track what we carry and what we need to get out. Coordinate resupply if the mission runs long. That's the paperwork answer." Mitchell leaned in slightly. "The real answer is that out there, when things get loud, and everybody on my team is going to be focused on their sector, their weapon, their job. And in that noise, things get dropped. Literally and otherwise. You know, ammunition, gear, comms, casualties. I need one person whose entire job is to see the whole board when nobody else can. That's you. You see the whole board. It's the only thing you've ever done. So don't let these guys make you feel small. Understand. Evelyn was quiet for a second because she had not expected to be understood, not here, not by a man like this. Understood, sir, she said. Good. He turned to the room. Listen up. Sergeant Carter is with us tonight. She is the reason we found this target. She stays clear of the assault. She manages our logistics and casualty flow. And if any one of you gives her a hard time, you'll answer to me. Are we clear? There were grunts of acknowledgement, not warm, but enough. And that was when the sniper spoke up. Corporal Mason Reed. He was younger than the others, with a quiet steadiness that reminded Evelyn strangely of herself. He did not sneer at her the way Kowalski had. He just looked at her with a curious tilt of his head, like he was reading something the others could not see. Carter, he said, you ever fire a weapon? The whole tent went still waiting for her to embarrass herself. Evelyn thought about lying. She thought about saying no, keeping her head down, staying the invisible clerk they all expected. It would have been so easy. But she thought about Whitmore and the notebook against her chest, and instead she said quietly, some, not in the field, but some. Reed nodded slowly. Some, he repeated. Then to her surprise, he almost smiled. All right, Carter, all right. She did not know why that small exchange mattered so much to her, but it did. Out of every man in that tent, Mason Reed was the only one who had looked at her and not immediately decided she was nothing. She would remember that. Later, when it counted, she would remember it more than she wanted to. The mission was set for that night, and the hours before it moved with a strange, thick slowness. Evelyn checked her equipment 3 times, then a 4th. Kowalski walked past and muttered something about the clerk counting her pencils, and a couple of the men laughed, but Evelyn did not rise to it. She had learned a long time ago that the people who mocked precision were usually the ones who ended up needing it. Mitchell found her sitting alone as the light failed. You scared? He asked. He did not ask it unkindly. He asked it the way you ask a fellow soldier. Yes, sir. Good. Reed's scared too. So am I. The ones who aren't scared are the ones who get people killed. He sat down beside her. You know, my first real op, I froze. Completely. Just locked up. Guy next to me had to grab me by the vest and shake me. I've never told anybody that. But I'm telling you because I want you to know that whatever happens out there freezing for a second doesn't make you a coward. What matters is what you do in the second after. Evelyn looked at him. Why are you telling me this? Sir, I'm just here for the supplies. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. I don't know, he admitted. Something about you. Can't put my finger on it. I've been doing this a long time, Carter, and I've learned to trust my gut. And my gut says you're not just here for the supplies. I don't know what you're here for, but I don't think you're here for the supplies. He stood up, clapped her once on the shoulder, and walked away to prep his team, leaving Evelyn sitting there with her heart pounding and the terrible feeling that he had seen straight through her to a truth she had not even admitted to herself. Then it was time. The helicopter lifted off into a sky with no moon, and Evelyn sat wedged between 2 SEALs twice her size, her rifle across her knees, feeling the whole aircraft vibrate up through her bones. Nobody spoke. Each man was inside his own head, running his own drills, making whatever private peace a man makes before he throws himself into the dark. Evelyn pressed her hand once more to the notebook against her chest and closed her eyes. Breathe in slow, breathe out slower. Whitmore's voice in her head as clear as if he were sitting beside her. The moment comes when everyone depends on you. When it comes, do not think about whether you deserve to be the one. Just be the one. She had no idea she was minutes away from that exact moment. For a while, everything went right. That was the cruel part. The insertion was smooth. The pilots threaded the aircraft through the black valleys low and fast, and the objective grew closer with every passing minute, and Evelyn began to let herself believe foolishly that maybe this would be simple. Fly in, do the job, fly out. That was the plan. Plans are beautiful things right up until the moment they die. The first sign that something was wrong was a change in the sound. Evelyn, who had spent her entire life noticing when a pattern broke, felt it before anyone said a word. A hitch in the rhythm of the engine, a vibration that had not been there a second ago. She opened her eyes. Across from her, Reed opened his eyes too. Their gazes met. He had felt it as well. "Something's wrong," she said. Not loudly, just enough for him to hear. And that was when the world came apart. There was a flash outside, a hard white flash that turned the inside of the aircraft to bone, and then a sound like the sky itself being torn in half. The helicopter lurched violently sideways. Somebody shouted. The pilot's voice came screaming over the net, fast and clipped, in terrible words Evelyn only half caught. RPG taking fire, going down, brace, brace, brace. They had been ambushed before they ever reached the target. The aircraft dropped. Not a controlled descent, a fall. Evelyn's stomach flew up into her throat and her hands locked onto the frame, and every man in that helicopter was suddenly a passenger on a machine that no longer answered to anyone. She heard Mitchell's voice, unbelievably calm, even now, saying, hold on, we're going in, tuck and hold." And she tucked and she held, and she thought with a strange clarity, so this is how it happens. This is how it happens for me. And then everything was noise and impact and darkness. She did not lose consciousness. She would learn later that she was one of the lucky ones. When the world stopped spinning, she was on her side, still strapped in, and there was smoke and shouting and the terrible groan of torn metal, and her whole body screamed at her. But she could move. She could move. "Carter," Mitchell's voice close. "Carter, you with me?" "I'm here," she said, and was amazed her voice worked. "I'm here, sir." Get out, everybody out, move, move, move." The next minutes were chaos, the kind of chaos that has no shape to it, just hands and bodies and voices, men dragging each other out of the wreck, the smell of fuel thick and choking. Evelyn found herself out on the rocks, and her training, that deep, steady core Whitmore had spent months building in her, took over before her fear could. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She started counting. She counted the men as they came out. 1. 2, 3. She counted the ones who were moving and the ones who had to be carried. She saw who was hurt and how badly. She saw the whole board exactly the way Mitchell had said she would, and some cold, clear part of her mind began sorting it all into place, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Kowalski's hurt his leg," she called out. "Bad, but not arterial. Delgado's carrying him. We're missing someone, sir. I count 9. We should have 10. We're missing 1. Mitchell spun around. Who are we missing?" And that was the first of the moments that would test her, because as Evelyn scanned the survivors, her stomach turned to ice. "Reed," she said. "We're missing Reed." "Here," a voice ragged from near the wreck. "I'm here. I'm okay. Got tangled." And there was the sniper dragging himself clear, his rifle case somehow still slung across his back, because a man like Reed would sooner lose an arm than lose that rifle. Relief flooded through Evelyn so hard it nearly buckled her knees. 10. All 10. Alive. But alive was not the same as safe, not remotely, because now the shooting started. It came from the high ground, from the dark ridges above them. Muzzle flashes blooming like ugly flowers in the black, and the rock all around them began to crack and spit and scream. The SEALs reacted instantly, all their training snapping into place, and within seconds they had thrown themselves into cover and were returning fire. And Evelyn found herself dragged down behind a spine of rock by Mitchell's hand, fisted in her vest. "Stay down," he roared over the noise. "Stay down and stay with me." The enemy had planned this. Evelyn understood that immediately with the same cold clarity that let her find a missing pair of rounds in a warehouse. This was not luck. Somebody had known they were coming. Somebody had waited. The ambush on the helicopter, the fighters already positioned on the high ground, this was a trap that had been set with patience and care. And now the trap had closed, and 10 Americans were pinned at the bottom of it. "Sir, they're above us on 3 days," Evelyn shouted, her mind mapping it even through her terror. "We're in a bowl. If they get the 4th side, we're surrounded." Mitchell shot her a look, and even in the chaos, she saw the surprise in it, the recalculation, the man realizing that the clerk was seeing the battlefield the way a commander sees it. "She's right," he barked to his team. "Watch the east flank. Do not let them get the east flank. Reed, I need eyes up high. I need you to start thinning them out now." And Mason Reed moved. Evelyn watched him do it, and even in that hell, she understood she was watching something rare. Reed pulled his rifle from its case, and everything about him changed. The chaos seemed to slow around him, and he found a position low and protected, and he settled in behind that scope with a stillness that Evelyn recognized in her bones because it was the same stillness Whitmore had spent months carving into her. Reed was the reason they still had a chance. She understood that at once. The enemy had numbers and the high ground, but Reed had precision, and in a fight like this, one man who could reach out and touch a target at distance was worth 10 men spraying bullets into the dark. His first shot silenced a position on the ridge. His second broke up a group trying to flank. He was buying them time. He was buying them everything. He's holding them, Evelyn breathed. As long as he's shooting, they can't close on us. That's the idea, Mitchell said grimly. That's why they'll come for him first. The words had barely left his mouth. Evelyn would replay the next few seconds for the rest of her life, slow them down, take them apart, put them back together, searching for something she could have done differently. There was nothing. It happened the way these things happen, without warning, without fairness, in the space between two heartbeats. Reed shifted position to engage a new threat. He exposed himself for less than a second, and a burst of enemy fire found him. Evelyn did not hear it hit. There was too much noise for that. She only saw the sniper jerk backward, saw the impact throw him off his position, saw him go down hard against the rocks. And she saw the rifle, that beautiful, deadly, precious rifle, the one thing standing between the team and the enemy, closing in, fly from his hands and clatter down the slope onto the open rock below. And then there was silence where the shooting had been. Not real silence. The battle still raged, but the rifle was silent. The one voice that had been holding the enemy back was gone, and Evelyn felt the whole nature of the fight change in an instant, felt the enemy sense it, felt the pressure shift, as fighters who had been pinned by Reed's shots suddenly began to move, to rise, to push down toward them. "Reed's down," someone screamed. "Reed's down. Reed's hit. Get him! Get him! Pull him back!" Mitchell was moving. Everyone was moving. And Delgado lunged out and grabbed Reed by the vest and hauled him back into cover, and Reed was alive. Evelyn could see he was alive, but he was hit in the shoulder, and the arm in his rifle hand was useless, and there was no way on earth that he was going to be shooting anyone tonight. And the rifle lay out there on the open rock, silent. Mitchell understood what that meant faster than anyone. Evelyn watched it hit him, watched the calculation flash across his face, the terrible math of it. Without that rifle putting rounds on the ridge, the enemy would close the distance in minutes. They would flow down off that high ground and into the bowl, and it would be over. All 10 of them. Over. "The rifle," Mitchell shouted. "Somebody get that rifle." But nobody could. That was the horror of the moment, the thing Evelyn grasped in a single sick instant. The rifle had fallen into the open, onto exposed rock, in a place the enemy had lines on. Every man who could shoot was pinned down, committed to holding the flanks, keeping the enemy from overrunning them right now, this second. And the one clear path to the rifle ran straight across ground that was being raked by fire. "I can't get to it," Delgado yelled. "It's in the open. I'll never make it." "Kowalski, can you?" "I can't move, sir. My leg's gone." "Somebody has to get that rifle, or we are all dead." Mitchell's voice cracked for the first time, the calm finally breaking. Because he could see it. He could see the whole thing coming apart, and there was nothing he could do about it. Every man he had was already committed, already fighting for his life, and the one weapon that could save them all lay untouched in a killing field, and the seconds were running out. Evelyn heard all of it. She saw all of it. The rifle on the rock, the enemy rising off the ridge, Reed bleeding in Delgado's arms, his eyes wide and desperate, staring at his own weapon lying useless in the open. Mitchell out of options, 10 men with seconds to live, and something happened inside her. It was not a decision. She would try later to explain it to people, and she would never quite find the words, because it was not a thing she decided. It was more like a door opening. Everything Whitmore had ever built in her, every hour on that range, every drill, every time he had shouted in her ear and clapped his hands beside her head and told her to hold her center, all of it rose up at once. And beneath the terror, beneath the animal panic screaming in her body, there was suddenly a place of perfect stillness. The moment comes when everyone depends on you. She looked at the rifle. She looked at the path to it. And in that stillness, cold and clear, her mind did the only thing it had ever known how to do. It saw the whole board. It saw the angles of enemy fire, the spots of cover between here and there, the timing of the bursts. The 2-second gaps when the incoming fire shifted to another sector. She saw a way, Not a safe way. There was no safe way, but a way. Sir, she said. Mitchell did not hear her. He was shouting into the radio, calling for support that was too far away, his voice raw. Sir, Evelyn said louder. He turned, and whatever he saw on her face made him stop. I can get the rifle, she said. For one full second, Ryan Mitchell just stared at her, and Evelyn watched a dozen things cross his face. Disbelief, refusal, the instinct to protect the clerk, to keep the one non-combatant on his team out of the fire. She could see him about to say no. Carter, you are not going out there. That's an order. You'll be dead before you take 3 steps. There's a 2-second gap, she said fast, steady, her voice not shaking at all now, and that lack of shaking seemed to unnerve him more than anything. Every time they shift fire to hit Delgado's position on the left, there's a 2-second gap in the fire crossing that rock. I've been counting it. I can make it to the rifle in that gap. But it has to be now, because they're going to close the distance in about 90 seconds, and then there won't be any gaps at all. You've been counting it, Mitchell repeated, stunned. It's what I do, sir. I count things. Let me count this. And there it was, the whole of it. The woman behind the numbers, the clerk, they had all dismissed, standing in the middle of the worst night of her life, offering the one thing she had that could save them, and the only currency she had ever really possessed. Not strength, not aggression, not the swagger of a warrior, just the strange, quiet, relentless precision that had lived inside her since she was a girl, at her father's kitchen table, learning that the small things are the big things. Reed, bleeding half-conscious in Delgado's arms, lifted his head. His eyes found Evelyn's, and through the pain, he understood something the others had not yet caught up to. Let her, Reed rasped. Mitchell whipped around. Reed, let her, sir. Reed's voice was barely there, but there was iron in it. Back in the tent, I asked her if she'd ever fired a weapon, and she said some. But she didn't say it like a clerk says it. She said it like a shooter says it. Look at her, sir. Look at her face right now. She's not scared. Everybody out here is scared, and she's not. Let her go. And Mitchell looked at Evelyn's face, and she watched him see it, the stillness, the thing Whitmore had seen that very first afternoon on the range, the thing Mitchell's own gut had been trying to tell him back in the tent when he said, I don't think you're here for the supplies. The whole board shifted, and for the first time, a lieutenant who had spent his life leading the most elite warriors on Earth looked at a logistics specialist and saw a soldier. If I say no, Mitchell said slowly, we all die in about 90 seconds anyway. Yes, sir, Evelyn said, we do. He held her gaze one heartbeat longer, and then Ryan Mitchell made the hardest bet of his career. Go, he said. God help us, Carter, go. And team, listen up. On my mark, everybody puts everything you've got on that ridge. We make them keep their heads down. We cover her. We do not let her run alone. You get me? A ragged chorus of yes came back. Evelyn moved to the edge of the cover. Her breath was slow. Her hands were still. She could hear her own heartbeat, and it was not racing anymore. It had dropped into that low, steady rhythm she had only ever felt through a rifle scope, the rhythm of a person who has stopped being afraid because she has become something else entirely, something with only one job and total focus on doing it. She reached up and pressed her hand once against the notebook over her heart. Bring it back to me yourself. That's an order. I'm coming back, Whitmore, she whispered, too quiet for anyone to hear. I'm bringing it back. She watched the enemy fire. She counted the rhythm of it the way she had counted supply numbers her whole life, and she found the pattern, and she waited for the gap, and the whole world narrowed down to a single stretch of open rock and a rifle lying at the end of it. Mitchell's hand came up. Ready, he said. The fire shifted left toward Delgado. The gap opened. Mark. And Sergeant Evelyn Carter, the woman who was never supposed to hold a rifle, the clerk, the woman behind the numbers, the one everyone had looked at and dismissed, came up out of that cover and ran straight into the open, straight into the fire, straight toward the one weapon that could save every man on that mountain. While behind her, the SEAL team unloaded everything they had at the ridge, and the whole night exploded into thunder around her, and every soul in that bowl held their breath and watched the last person anyone expected sprint across the killing ground toward the silent rifle and prayed to God she would reach it in time. The gap held for exactly 2 seconds, and Evelyn Carter used every fraction of them. She did not think about the bullets. That was the thing that would astonish her most later, when she was safe enough to be astonished by anything. In the moment, there was no room for the bullets. There was only the rock beneath her boots, the distance shrinking with every stride, and the rifle waiting at the end of it. Her mind had done the math and her body simply obeyed, and behind her the SEAL team poured fire under the ridge with everything they had, and the world was a wall of sound, and she ran through it like a woman running through rain. 3 strides. 4. The gap was closing. She felt it closing the way she felt a supply count coming in up short, a wrongness pressing in at the edges. Somewhere in the back of her mind a clock was running, and it was almost out of time. She dove. She hit the rock hard, the breath punching out of her lungs, her hands closing around the rifle, even as the enemy fire found the spot where she had been standing half a second before chips of stone spitting up where her legs had just passed. And then she had it. She had the rifle. Reed's rifle warm still from his hands, heavier than she expected and lighter than she feared, and she pulled it in against her body and rolled tumbling into the thin cover of a low shelf of rock. And for one impossible second, she just lay there with the weapon clutched to her chest and understood that she was alive. "She's got it," Delgado's voice somewhere behind her cracking with disbelief. "She's got the rifle. Carter's got the rifle." "Oh, Carter, get back," Mitchell was screaming. "You've got it now. Get back to cover." But Evelyn did not get back, because from where she lay low on that shelf of rock, she could see something Mitchell could not. She could see the ridge. She could see the enemy. And what she saw made the cold, clear place inside her go colder and clearer still. They were setting up a machine gun. Off to the right on the high ground, a team of fighters was moving a heavy weapon into position, and Evelyn understood in an instant what it meant. A machine gun on that ridge with that angle down into the bowl would sweep the whole SEAL position. It would not matter how good the men were or how well they were covered. That gun would rake them out of existence in under a minute. Reed had been keeping the enemy from setting it up. Reed was down, and in the chaos of getting her the rifle, nobody else had seen it. Nobody but Evelyn. "Sir," she shouted, "machine gun high, right? They're setting up a machine gun. If they get it running, we're finished." She heard Mitchell curse. She heard him twist to look, heard him say, "I can't get an angle on it. Nobody can get an angle on it." And she understood that too, because the gun was tucked behind a fold of rock that shielded it from everyone in the SEAL position. From everyone except her. From her low shelf, out ahead of the team, she had the one angle in that entire bowl that could reach the machine gun team. One angle and a rifle in her hands. "Carter," Mitchell's voice again. "Carter, get back here. That's an order. Do you hear me? Get back to cover now." And Evelyn Carter, for the first time in her military career, disobeyed a direct order. "I can see them, sir," she called back, and her voice was so steady it did not sound like her own. "I'm the only one who can see them. If I come back, that gun goes hot and we all die. I'm staying. I'm taking the shot." There was a silence from behind her. Not a real silence. The battle still roared, but a silence in the place where Mitchell's next order should have been. Because he knew she was right. He had known from the second she said machine gun. There was no version of this where she came back. There was only her and the gun, and whether the clerk they had all laughed at could do the one thing that would keep them all alive. "Then take it," Mitchell said, his voice gone rough and quiet. "Take the shot, Carter. We'll cover you. Take the shot." Evelyn settled behind the rifle, and everything Whitmore had ever taught her came home. She pulled the stock into her shoulder the way he had shown her 1,000 times cheek, to the same spot, the world compressing down to the small, bright circle of the scope. Her heart was pounding. Her hands wanted to shake. Every muscle in her body was screaming at her to move, to hide, to flee. And into all of that, into the panic and the noise and the terror, came Whitmore's voice, as clear as if the old man were lying on the rock beside her. "Control your breathing," she breathed in, slow. "Trust your training," she breathed out, slower. "Belong to the shot." And on the pause at the bottom of that breath, in that little moment of perfect stillness that she had first found on a quiet range half a world away, Evelyn Carter stopped being afraid. She stopped being a logistics specialist. She stopped being the woman behind the numbers. She became, for the length of one held breath, the only thing that mattered on that entire mountain. She became the shot. Through the scope, the machine gun team was clear. 2 fighters working fast, feeding the belt, swinging the barrel down toward the SEAL position. Seconds from opening fire. Seconds from ending everything. Her finger found the trigger. She did not jerk it. Whitmore's flinching private, the one who had brought her into all of this, drifted through the back of her mind, and she did the opposite of everything he had done. She did not anticipate. She did not tense. She let the pressure build slow, and even the way you let a number settle into place until the rifle went off almost as a surprise the way it is supposed to. The first shot stopped the machine gun. She saw the fighter behind the gun go down. She saw the weapon fall silent before it ever fired a single round into her team, and a sound went up from the sealed position behind her, a raw, ragged shout of disbelief, because they had all seen it. They had all watched the clerk put a single perfect round into the one target that would have killed them all. But Evelyn was not done. The second fighter lunged for the fallen gun, grabbing for it, trying to bring it back into the fight. And Evelyn, still in that place of stillness, already had him. She breathed. She waited for the pause. The second shot took him before his hands ever reached the weapon. The machine gun was dead, and with it, the enemy's best chance of overrunning them. She got it. Kowalski was screaming, the same Kowalski who had called her a supply clerk, who had laughed when she counted her gear. She got the gun. Did you see that? Did you see that shot? 2 shots, Delgado said, and there was something almost reverent in his voice. 2 shots, clerk my ass, 2 shots. But there was no time to celebrate, and Evelyn knew it better than any of them, because she was still the one who could see the whole board. The machine gun was gone, but the enemy was still up there, still moving, and now they knew there was a shooter down on that low shelf who could reach them, and they were going to come for her. They did. She saw the enemy shift their attention, saw fighters begin to redirect their fire toward her position, saw groups start to move to flank her low shelf, and she understood with cold clarity that she had traded one danger for another. She had saved the team from the machine gun. Now she was the target. "Sir, they're coming for me," she called out, working the bolt, finding her next target. "They know where I am. They're trying to flank my position on the left." "Reed, talk to me. Can you see it? Can you spot for her?" Mitchell shouted. And that was the second thing that would astonish Evelyn later. Mason Reed shot through the shoulder, and the arm, unable to hold a rifle, dragged himself up against a rock so he could see the ridge, so he could use the one thing he had left, his eyes, his knowledge, everything a sniper carries beyond the weapon itself. "Carter." Reed's voice was thin with pain, but sharp with purpose. "Left ridge, that cluster of rocks, 2 of them moving. They think they've got cover, but they don't. The shelf you're on gives you the angle underneath. Trust me, underneath the rocks, you can reach them." Evelyn did not question him. A shooter learns to trust a good spotter with his life. And something in her knew Reed was a good spotter, maybe the best she would ever have. She shifted, found the cluster of rocks, saw the gap underneath that he had seen, the sliver of exposure the flanking fighters did not know they were showing. She breathed. She waited. She fired. "Hit," Reed barked. "One down. The second one's pulling back. He's rattled. He doesn't know where the shot came from. You've got him confused, Carter. Keep it up. Don't let him settle." And something extraordinary began to happen on that mountain. A wounded sniper who could not shoot and a logistics clerk who was never supposed to hold a rifle became one weapon between them. Reed was the eyes. Evelyn was the hands. He read the battlefield, called the targets, tracked the enemy's movement with the accumulated instinct of 100 missions. And she executed shot after patient, shot at her stillness holding. Even as the fire came back at her, even as rounds cracked off the rock around her position, even as the flanking fighters tried again and again to close the distance, and found every time that there was a shooter down there who simply would not miss. "They can't figure it out," Reed said, and there was something like wonder in his ragged voice. "They think there's a whole team down there. They can't believe it's one person. Carter, you hearing me? They think there's a squad on that shelf. It's just you." "It's not just me," Evelyn said, working the bolt, her eyes never leaving the scope. "It's us. Keep calling them." And Mitchell behind them heard all of it, heard the impossible thing that was happening. The clerk and the wounded sniper holding an entire enemy force at bay. And he did what a good leader does. He built on it. He took the space Evelyn was buying, and he used it, reorganizing his team, consolidating the wounded, tightening the perimeter, getting Kowalski's leg wrapped, getting the casualties into the best cover, turning a scattered group of survivors into a defensive position that could actually hold. "Everybody hear that?" Mitchell shouted to his men. "Carter's got the high right locked. Reed's spotting. That whole flank is theirs. We hold the rest. We hold and we wait for extract, and every one of us walks off this mountain. You hear me? Every one of us. For the next several minutes, Evelyn held the position. She would never be able to say afterward how long it truly lasted. Time did strange things behind that scope. It stretched and compressed, and there was only the rhythm of it, breathe and wait, and fire, Reed's voice calling the targets, the bolt working under her hands, the endless discipline of staying still when everything wanted her to run. Her shoulder ached from the recoil, her hands were raw, her eyes burned, and still she held. And here's the thing that mattered most, the thing that Evelyn understood even in the middle of it, the thing that separated her from the kind of soldier who does this for glory. She was not thinking about herself. Not once. Not for a single shot. She was not thinking about proving the doubters wrong, though she was proving every one of them wrong with every round. She was not thinking about the story that would be told, or the recognition that would come, or the way Kowalski's face had changed. All of that would come later, and none of it was in her mind now. What was in her mind was Reed bleeding behind her, trusting her. Delgado holding the left, Kowalski with his ruined leg, Mitchell who had bet everything on her. 9 men who needed her to keep breathing slow and keep her hands still and keep doing the one thing she could do that they could not. She was doing it for them, only for them, and somehow that was the very thing that made her unbreakable. There was a moment near the worst of it when a fresh wave of fighters pushed hard on the right, trying to overwhelm her position by sheer numbers, and for a few terrible seconds it looked like they might succeed. Rounds hammered her shelf. Reed's voice was coming fast, target after target, more than she could take, and she felt for the first time the cold edge of real doubt. Too many, she breathed. Reed, there's too many. I can't take them all fast enough. Yes, you can. Reed's voice cut through hard and certain. Yes, you can, Carter. You don't take them all. You take the right ones. The lead man, always the lead man. You take the lead man and the rest lose their nerve. Trust me. The one out front, the one waving them on. Take him. Evelyn found the lead man, the one out front urging the others forward. She breathed. She fired. He fell. And exactly as Reed had promised, the push broke. The fighters behind their fallen leader faltered, lost their momentum, went to ground. The wave collapsed. And Evelyn understood in that instant a truth about combat that all Whitmore's drills had circled but never quite named. It was not about how many. It was about which one. It was about seeing the pattern, finding the piece that held it together, and removing it with precision. It was, she realized, was something close to a wild laugh, exactly like finding the one wrong requisition code that made an entire supply discrepancy make sense. It was the same skill. It had always been the same skill. There it is, Reed breathed, and she could hear him almost smiling through the pain. There it is, Carter. Now you've got it. Now you understand what you are. The rescue came in the deep dark of the early morning hours. Evelyn heard the helicopters before she let herself believe them. She had learned that night not to believe good things too early. But the sound grew unmistakable, the heavy beat of American birds coming in fast and low, and then the ridge above them lit up as gunships raked the enemy positions, and Evelyn finally felt the pressure break. The fighters who had been trying to overrun them for what felt like a lifetime broke and scattered into the dark, hunted now instead of hunting. And still Evelyn did not lower the rifle. Not until Reed's voice, exhausted and cracking, told her it was over. Stand down, Carter, he said softly. It's done. You can stand down. You held. You held the whole time. It's done. Only then did her hands begin to shake. Only then, with the danger passing, did the thing she had held at bay for so long finally break loose inside her, and she found herself trembling all over, her breath coming ragged, the rifle suddenly impossibly heavy in her arms. She had held her center through the whole nightmare, and now that she no longer had to, her body was cashing every check her will had written. She pressed her forehead against the cold rock and breathed and shook and did not cry quite, but came very close. The rescue birds touched down. Men in flight suits poured out, medics rushing to the wounded, and the SEAL position that had been fighting for its life became a swarm of controlled, urgent activity. Reed was one of the first they took, and as they lifted him onto a stretcher, he grabbed Evelyn's sleeve with his good hand and would not let go until she looked at him. You hear me, Carter, he said. You listen to me. I've fought beside some of the best shooters this country has ever made, and what you did on that shelf tonight, One rifle, no spotter, half the time holding that whole flank. That is as good as anything I have ever seen. From anyone. You understand me? From anyone. Evelyn could not find her voice. She just nodded. Say you understand me. I understand you, she whispered. He let go. They carried him to the bird. And then Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell was standing in front of her. He did not speak at first. He looked at her, this man who had spent his whole life leading the most elite warriors on Earth, and Evelyn watched something work behind his tired eyes. Something he was struggling to put into words. Around them, the extraction went on. The wounded loaded the perimeter, held the machinery of survival grinding forward. But for a moment, it was just the two of them, the lieutenant and the clerk, standing on a mountain in the dark. When you raised your hand in that room back at Liberty, Mitchell said, finally his voice quiet. When you volunteered for this, I thought it was a mistake. I'll be honest with you. I thought some logistics NCO wanted a story to tell, and I was going to have to babysit her the whole way. That's what I thought. Evelyn said nothing. And back in the tent, when I said I didn't think you were here for the supplies, I didn't even know what I meant by it. It was just a feeling, just a thing my gut kept telling me that my head couldn't explain. He shook his head slowly. My gut knew. It knew before I did. It knew before you did. He stepped closer. And then Lieutenant Mitchell said the words that Evelyn Carter would carry with her for the rest of her life, the words that would come back to her in the hard nights ahead. The words that finally, after 25 years of being told she was the woman behind the numbers, told her something different. You saved every person on this mountain tonight, he said. Every single one. There are 9 men getting on those birds who are going home to their families because of you. Because a supply clerk that nobody thought twice about picked up a rifle and did the impossible. I've been doing this a long time, Carter. I have never seen anything like what you did tonight. Not once, not ever. And Evelyn standing there with Reed's rifle still in her hands and Whitmore's notebook still pressed against her heart felt something inside her come apart and then strangely come back together in a new shape. Because for the first time in her entire life, she understood. Her purpose had never been the numbers. The numbers had only ever been the training ground. The precision, the focus, the stillness, the relentless attention to the small things. All of it, everything her father had planted in her at that kitchen table, everything Whitmore had drawn out of her on that quiet range, it had all been preparing her for this. For a moment on a mountain when everyone depended on her, ready or not. For the moment when the title fell away and there was only her and what she could do. She was not a clerk who had gotten lucky. She was a soldier who had finally been asked to be one. I want to go home, she said quietly, and her voice broke a little on the word home because she was suddenly overwhelmingly aware of how close she had come to never seeing it again. You're going home, Mitchell said gently. He put his hand on her shoulder, and this time it was not the grip of an officer to a subordinate. It was the grip of one soldier to another. Come on, let's get you on the bird. You're going home, Sergeant Carter. You earned it more than any of us. She let him guide her toward the helicopter. Her legs felt strange under her, distant, like they belonged to someone else. She climbed aboard and sat down among the men she had saved, and as the bird lifted off the mountain and turned toward the lightening horizon, she looked down at the rock where she had lain, the shelf where a logistics specialist had become something else entirely, and she pressed her hand once more to the notebook over her heart. I'm coming back, Whitmore, she thought. I'm bringing it back myself, just like you ordered. And as Forward Operating Base Liberty grew closer and the adrenaline finally fully drained out of her, leaving behind an exhaustion deeper than anything she had ever known, Evelyn Carter closed her eyes and did not yet understand that the mission was over. But the hardest part was only beginning. That there was a wait coming. She had not been warned about a wait that Whitmore had tried to tell her about. When he said he was not worried about whether she could do it, he was worried about after. She did not understand that yet. For now, there was only the beat of the rotors, the warmth of the men around her, the notebook against her heart, and the slow gray light of a morning she had not been sure she would live to see rising over the mountains behind them as the helicopter carried Sergeant Evelyn Carter home. The flight back to Liberty was supposed to be the part where a soldier lets go, and Evelyn could not do it. She sat in the belly of that helicopter, wedged between 2 men who had watched her do the impossible, and she waited for the relief to come the way she had heard other soldiers describe it, that warm flood of "it's over, we made it." It did not come. Instead, her mind, that relentless machine that had never once in her life known how to stop counting, kept running the mountain again and again, frame by frame, as if it were still looking for the mistake. the missing around the code that ended in 914. Across from her, Delgado was watching her. He had been watching her since they lifted off, and finally he leaned forward so she could hear him over the rotors. "You okay, Carter?" "I'm fine," she said. "It was the automatic answer, the one everybody gives." Delgado nodded slowly, the way a man does when he knows he is being lied to and has decided to let it stand for now. "You know what I keep thinking about," he said, "that run, when you came up out of that cover and ran into the open. I've been doing this 6 years. I've got a wall of qualifications and schools, and I couldn't have made myself take that run. My body wouldn't have let me, and you just went like it was nothing." "It wasn't nothing," Evelyn said quietly. "No," Delgado agreed. "I don't guess it was." He sat back, but a moment later he leaned in again, and this time his voice was rougher. "Back at the staging point, when Kowalski called you a supply clerk, I didn't say anything. I just let it go. And I want you to know that I'm sorry for that. A man should say something when something's wrong, and I didn't." He paused. "I won't make that mistake again." Evelyn looked at him, this hard, competent operator apologizing to her in the back of a helicopter, and she did not know what to say. So she just said, "Thank you, Delgado." And she meant it more than the words could carry. A few feet away, Kowalski was propped against the bulkhead, his wrapped legs stretched out in front of him, his face gray from blood loss and pain. He had been quiet the whole flight, which was not like him, and Evelyn had assumed it was the wound. But now she realized he had been listening. And when Delgado sat back, Kowalski spoke, and his voice was thick. "Carter." She looked over. He struggled with it. She could see him struggling with it, this proud man who had laughed at her, forcing himself to look her in the eye. "I said things," he said, "back there before we went out. I called you a clerk. I said they sent us a supply clerk, like it was a joke. And then you." He stopped. His jaw worked. "That machine gun would have killed me first. I couldn't move. My leg was gone and I was right in its line, and I knew it. I saw it swinging toward me, and I thought, this is it. This is how I die, and I'm going to die because we got sent a clerk instead of a real shooter." He drew a breath that shook. "And then you put 2 rounds in that gun crew before it fired a single shot. You saved my life. The clerk saved my life. And I don't have the words to tell you how sorry I am for what I said, or how grateful I am that you were there when I was wrong." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "You don't owe me an apology, Kowalski." "Yeah," he said, "I do, and you're going to let me give it, because it's the only thing I've got to give you right now." He reached out his hand, and she took it, and he gripped it hard, the grip of a man holding on to the person who had kept him in the world. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for not being what I said you were." She held his hand until the tremor in it eased, and something in her chest, some old hard knot that had been tied there since the first time a soldier looked at her and saw only a woman with a clipboard, began very slowly to loosen. Up toward the front of the bird, Reed was strapped to his stretcher, drifting in and out as the medic worked on him. But he was awake enough to watch, and when Evelyn's eyes found him, he lifted 2 fingers off the stretcher in a small, weak salute. She understood it. 2 shots, 2 fingers, the machine gun. It was the closest thing to a joke a man could make in his condition. And it was also the highest compliment a sniper knew how to give, and it undid her a little to receive it. "He's going to be all right," she asked the medic. "Shoulder and arm," the medic said, not looking up. "He'll keep the arm. Might not shoot the way he used to, but he'll live, and he'll walk, and that's more than a lot of guys get." He glanced at her. "You did that, you know. All of you got out because that flank held. I heard it on the net the whole way in. 1 shooter on the right holding. Nobody could believe it was 1 person." He finally looked up at her, and there was a question in his face he was too professional to ask. Evelyn did not answer it. She just looked away out through the open side of the helicopter at the mountains sliding past below gray and endless in the early light. And that was when it finally started to hit her. Not the relief, something else. Something she had no name for yet. It came up quietly underneath the exhaustion, a kind of hollowness where she had expected to feel triumph. She had done the thing. She had saved them. 9 men were alive who would not have been. And instead of the warmth she thought she should feel, there was this strange spreading emptiness, and underneath the emptiness, faint, but growing something that felt almost like grief. She did not understand it. She pressed her hand to the notebook over her heart the way she had done all night, and she thought about the men she had stopped. The lead man of the wave that broke, the 2 on the machine gun, the fighters underneath the rocks that Reed had called. She had not thought about them at all in the moment. In the moment, they had been targets patterns, the pieces that had to be removed to keep the board from collapsing. But now, in the quiet of the flight, they were becoming something else in her mind. They were becoming people. People who had, until a few hours ago, been as alive as she was. She had never taken a life before that night. She had counted the ammunition that other people used to do it. She had tracked the rounds and the rifles and the magazines, and it had all been numbers clean and abstract, a column on a screen. And now she understood with a slow, dawning horror that every one of those numbers had always meant this, had always meant a moment on a mountain and a person on the other end of a scope and the terrible finality of a squeezed trigger. She had spent her whole career at the safe end of the supply chain, and in one night she had traveled all the way to the other end of it, the end where the numbers stopped being numbers. "Hey," Delgado's voice soft, pulling her back. He had been watching her again. "Where'd you go just now?" "Nowhere," she said. "I'm here." "No, you're not," he said, not unkindly. "I've seen that look. I've had that look. First time's the worst. Nobody tells you that part. They train you for everything except that part." He held her gaze. "You did what you had to do. 9 of us are alive. You remember that whatever else starts crowding in. You hold on to that." "I'm trying," she said. "I know. Just when it gets heavy, and it's going to get heavy, you find somebody to talk to. Don't carry it alone. That's how it eats guys up. Alone." He tapped his own chest. "You keep it in here with nobody to help you hold it, it gets bigger. You let it out, share the weight, it gets smaller. That's the only trick there is. That's the whole secret. Don't carry it alone." Evelyn looked at him and thought, without meaning to, of Whitmore. Of the sadness in his eyes when he had said he was not worried about whether she could do it, he was worried about after. She had not understood him then. She was beginning to understand him now, 30,000 feet, over the mountains of a country that had asked more of her than she had ever imagined giving. She was quiet for the rest of the flight. She watched the sky go from gray to pale gold. She watched the mountains give way to the flatter, harder ground near the base. She listened to the men around her, the low talk of survivors, the black jokes that were not really jokes, the long silences. She was one of them now. That was the strangest part. She had climbed onto that helicopter, a logistics specialist, and she was climbing off it. Something else, and the men around her knew it and treated her as one of their own, and she did not yet know how to be what she had become. When Liberty finally came into view on the horizon, she felt her chest tighten again, but this time for a different reason. Because down there somewhere on that base, an old man was waiting for his notebook. An old man who had seen what she was before she had seen it herself, who had drawn it out of her twice-a-week hour by patient hour on a quiet range where none of this had felt real, who had put 4 decades of his own hard survival into a battered little book and pressed it into her shaking hands and told her to bring it back to him herself. She had brought it back. And as the helicopter began its descent toward the base, Evelyn Carter looked down at the place where her whole life had been spent behind a folding desk, tracking the numbers that had turned out to mean everything, and she understood that the woman who had left this base a few days ago was not the woman coming home to it. She did not yet know who the new woman was. She did not yet know the weight she would have to learn to carry, or the choice that would soon be set in front of her, or how long it would take her to make peace with what she had done on that mountain in the dark. She only knew as the wheels touched down and the rotors began to slow that she had kept her word. To the men beside her, to Mitchell, to Reed, and most of all to the old marksman who had believed in her when she could not believe in herself. She pressed her hand one final time to the notebook over her heart, and she felt its worn cover through the fabric of her uniform, 40 years of survival, held together with fraying thread, and she whispered the only words that seemed to fit. "I brought it back, Whitmore. I brought it home." And then the door opened, and the light poured in, and Sergeant Evelyn Carter stepped down onto the ground of Forward Operating Base Liberty, a soldier now in every way that had ever mattered, carrying a rifle that was not hers, and a burden she did not yet fully understand, into a morning that had no idea what she had become. Word travels faster than any helicopter, and by the time Evelyn's boots hit the ground at Liberty, the whole base already knew. She could feel it before she understood it, the way people looked at her as she walked from the flight line. Soldiers she had never spoken to who had walked past her folding desk 100 times without a glance, now stopping to stare, to nod, to murmur to each other. A cook came out of the mess hall wiping his hands on his apron just to watch her pass. Two young privates snapped to attention and saluted her, and Evelyn, so tired she could barely see straight, returned it out of pure reflex before her brain even registered what was happening. She did not want any of it. That was the first thing she learned about coming home a hero. She did not want the looks. She did not want the salutes. She wanted a shower and a bed and about 14 hours of darkness, and more than any of that, she wanted to find one particular old man and put a battered notebook back into his hands. But the Army had other plans first, the way the Army always does. There were debriefs, there were medical checks she did not think she needed and the doctors insisted on anyway. There were officers she had never met who wanted to shake her hand, and officers she had met who suddenly could not do enough for her. There was a colonel who came down personally, a man whose name she had only ever seen at the top of memos, and he stood in front of her and said, "Sergeant Carter, in 30 years I have never read an after-action report like the one coming off that mountain. Not once. What you did is going to be studied. Do you understand that soldiers are going to learn from what you did?" "Yes, sir," Evelyn said, because it was the only thing to say. "You should be proud." "Yes, sir," she said again. But the word proud sat wrong in her chest, and she could not have explained why. It went on like that for 2 days. The praise came from every direction, and Evelyn accepted all of it with the same quiet, hollow politeness, and inside she felt herself drifting further and further from the person all these people thought they were congratulating, because they were praising the shots. The 2 rounds into the machine gun, the flanks she had held, the men she had saved. And every time someone praised the shots, Evelyn saw the faces on the other end of the scope, and the hollow place inside her grew a little wider. She had not slept. That was the thing nobody could see. She had lain in her bunk for 2 nights with her eyes open, and every time she closed them, she was back on that shelf and her finger was on the trigger, and the world was narrowing down to the small, bright circle, and a man was standing in it who did not know he had seconds to live. She would jerk awake with her heart slamming, her hand curled around a rifle that was not there. On the 3rd day, they gave Reed's rifle back to the armory, and Evelyn carried it there herself. She would not let anyone else do it. And when she set it down on the counter and signed the form releasing it, her hand shook so badly the armorer had to steady the clipboard. He pretended not to notice. She was grateful for that. It was after that, walking back across the base in the low afternoon light, empty-handed, for the first time since the mountain, that the weight finally caught up with her, all at once. She did not make it back to her quarters. She got as far as the low concrete steps behind the supply building, the quiet place where she used to eat her lunch alone, back when she was just the woman behind the numbers, and she sat down hard on the steps, and she could not get up again. It was not that she was hurt. It was that something inside her had simply stopped holding the way a dam holds and holds and holds until it doesn't. She sat there with her elbows on her knees and her face in her hands, and she did not cry exactly, but she came to the edge of it and stayed there shaking, unable to move, unable to think, unable to be the composed hero everyone kept telling her she was. That was where Whitmore found her. She did not hear him come. She only knew he was there when the step creaked under his weight as he lowered himself down beside her, slow and careful the way older men sit. He did not say anything at first. He just sat. And after a moment, without lifting her head, Evelyn reached into her jacket and pulled out the notebook. Its cover worn soft, its corners rounded. 40 years of survival, held together with fraying thread, and she held it out to him without a word. Whitmore looked at it, then he looked at her, and he did not take it. "I told you to bring it back to me yourself," he said gently. "You did. That was the order. It's done now. The book is yours." "Whitmore, I can't." "You can, and you will, because that book was never really about the shooting Carter. It was about a man trying to hold on to everything he'd learned so it wouldn't die with him. And now I know it won't, because it's in you, every page of it. I saw the report. I know what you did up there." His voice roughened. "You didn't just carry my notebook up that mountain. You carried everything in it. You lived it. So it's yours now. It always was from the first day you walked onto my range with that clipboard and told me a man was flinching. I just didn't know it yet." Evelyn's hand closed around the book. She pulled it back against her chest, and she still could not lift her head. "Something's wrong with me," she whispered. "No," Whitmore said. "Something's right with you. That's the problem." She did lift her head then and looked at him confused, her eyes red-rimmed from the sleepless nights. Whitmore looked out across the base at the ordinary afternoon, the soldiers going about their ordinary business. And when he spoke again, his voice had gone somewhere far away, somewhere she had never heard it go before. "Let me tell you something I have never told anybody on this base," he said. "You know why I train soldiers to shoot? Everybody assumes it's because I love it. Because I'm some old warrior who can't let go. And they're wrong. I train soldiers to shoot because I want them to survive. Every single one of them. I have buried too many, Carter, too many young people who trusted me and went out and didn't come back. And every time I told myself if I'd taught them one more thing, one more skill, one more habit, maybe they'd have made it. So I keep teaching. It's the only thing I know how to do with all of it." He paused. "And you I taught, and you went out and you came back. Do you have any idea what that means to an old man who has spent 40 years mostly watching them not come back?" Evelyn did not answer. She could not. "But I knew," Whitmore went on quieter now, "I knew when I sent you off with that book that if you made it back, you wouldn't come back the same. Because there's a thing that happens the first time, and there's no way to warn a person about it that actually prepares them. You just have to go through it." He turned to look at her. "You want to know what's wrong with you, Carter? Nothing. You're feeling the weight. That's all. That's the whole of it. You took lives up there. To save lives, yes. To save 9 men, yes. But you took lives and now you have to carry them, and your body doesn't know what to do with that yet. It's the most human thing in the world what you're feeling. It's the opposite of something being wrong with you. I keep seeing them," Evelyn said, the words coming out low and raw. "When I close my eyes, the ones in the scope, I didn't think about them at all when it was happening. Not 1 second. They were just targets. They were just the pieces I had to move to keep everyone alive. And now I can't stop seeing their faces. And I never even saw their faces. I saw them through a scope. I don't even know what they really look like. But I see them anyway. Every time I close my eyes." She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. "What kind of person does that make me? That I could do it without feeling anything, and now I can't stop feeling everything." And Whitmore said the thing that would stay with her for the rest of her life. "It makes you exactly the kind of person we need holding the rifle," he said. "Listen to me, Carter. Listen close, because this is the most important thing I will ever tell you, more important than any breathing drill or any lesson on that range. The hardest part of combat isn't pulling the trigger. Anybody can be taught to pull a trigger. The military does it every day, thousands of times over. The hardest part of combat is learning how to live afterward, learning how to carry what you did. And the fact that it's hard for you, the fact that it hurts, the fact that you're sitting on these steps shaking instead of walking around this base soaking up the glory that is the best thing I have ever seen in you. Better than the shooting, better than the flank you held, because it means you're still in there. It means it didn't turn you into something else." Evelyn lowered her hands and looked at him. "The ones I worry about," Whitmore said, "are the ones who come back and feel nothing, who take a life and shrug, who go looking for the next one. Those are the ones who are lost, Carter, and most of them don't even know it. The pain you're feeling right now, this weight, this thing that's eating at you, that's not damage. That's your conscience. That's your compassion. That's the part of you that's still human, standing up and refusing to be quiet. And I need you to understand something." He leaned in and his old eyes were fierce. "A person who stops caring is the person who's truly lost themselves. The day you can do what you did up there and feel nothing, that's the day you should worry, not today. Today, feeling all of this, you're more yourself than you have ever been." Something broke loose in Evelyn's chest, and this time she did cry quietly, the tears coming without any sound, and Whitmore did not look away and did not tell her to stop. He just sat beside her on the step, an old man and a young woman, and let her carry it in the open for a while instead of alone in the dark. "I don't know if I can do this again," she said when she could speak. "If they ask me to, I don't know if I have it in me." "That's a question for later," Whitmore said. "Mama, no. Not today. Today you just have to get through today. Tomorrow you get through tomorrow. That's how it works. That's the only way it works. One day and then the next, and slowly it gets lighter. It never goes away. I won't lie to you, but it gets lighter. And one day you wake up and you can close your eyes without seeing them. And you'll be so grateful for that ordinary morning that you'll want to weep for a whole different reason." He put his hand on her shoulder. "I'm proof of it, Carter. 40 years of proof sitting right here beside you. It gets lighter. You have my word. She leaned into him, then just slightly, the way you lean into someone who has become, without your quite noticing, one of the most important people in your life. And Whitmore let her. They sat like that as the light stretched long across the base. It was Reed who came to see her next 2 days after that out of the base hospital, with his arms strapped tight to his body, moving slow and careful, but moving. He found her at the range of all places because that was where she had started going. Not to shoot. She could not bring herself to shoot yet. But she went and she sat and she watched other soldiers on the firing line, and something about the familiar rhythm of it, the crack of the rounds, the smell of it, steadied her in a way she could not explain. Figured I'd find you here, Reed said, easing himself down onto the bench beside her. How's the arm? Attached, he said, which is more than the doc thought I'd get for a while there. Thanks to you. He said it plainly, the way he said everything. I'd be dead on that mountain if you hadn't held the flank, Carter. So would half the team. You know that, right? You actually know that. Because I've seen guys do incredible things and then somehow convince themselves it didn't count. Mitchell said the same thing. Mitchell's right. He's usually right. It's annoying. Reed watched the firing line for a moment. You're not shooting. No, because of the mountain. Evelyn was quiet. Then she said, because every time I pick one up, I'm back there. And I don't know how to be back there and be okay at the same time. Reed nodded slowly. He did not rush to fix it. That was one of the things Evelyn had come to trust about him. He never rushed to fix a thing that could not be rushed. You know what I did after my first bad one, he said. I stopped shooting, 3 weeks. Couldn't make myself do it. Everybody figured I was done, that I'd lost my nerve. And you know what got me back? He glanced at her. A guy a lot like Whitmore, actually. Old Salt. He sat me down and he said, Reed, the rifle is just a tool. It's not good and it's not evil. It's a hammer. And a hammer can build a house or it can break a skull, and the hammer doesn't care either way because the hammer's got no soul. The soul is the hand that holds it. So the only question that matters is whose hand is on the tool. And a tool in a good hand, a careful hand, a hand that feels the weight of what it's doing, that's the safest place that tool can possibly be. He paused. You've got good hands, Carter, the best I've ever spotted for. And the world's a whole lot safer with a rifle in your good hands than in the hands of the men you stopped it up there. You remember that. Next time you can't make yourself pick one up. It's not about whether you can live with holding it. It's about who's holding it if you don't. Evelyn turned the words over. They fit together with what Whitmore had told her on the steps. 2 different men, 2 different lifetimes of hard experience arriving at the same quiet truth from opposite directions. You and Whitmore should talk, she said. You'd get along. I'd like that, Reed said. A man who trained a shooter like you, he'd very much like to meet him. He stood slow and careful, cradling his strapped arm. Come by and see me before I ship out for rehab, all right? And Carter. He waited until she looked at him. When you're ready, not before, but when you're ready, pick one up again. The world needs your hands on it, I mean that. He walked off across the base and Evelyn watched him go. And something in her that had been clenched tight for days eased just a little. The choice came a week later, and it came from Mitchell. He found her in the mess hall, sat down across from her without asking, and put a folder on the table between them. I'm not going to dress this up, he said. You know I don't do that, so here it is. There's a program, Advanced Precision Training. The Army's best. It's brutal. It's selective, and most people never even get considered for it. He tapped the folder. I put your name forward, and it went through. They want you, Carter. Based on the mountain, based on the after action, based on everything they want you in that program. If you say yes. Evelyn looked at the folder but did not open it. And if I say no, then you go back to logistics, Mitchell said simply. Back to the desk, back to the numbers. A safe life. A good life, honestly. Nobody would think less of you. You've already done more than any of us had a right to ask. You could hang it up right now and be a legend and go home at a reasonable hour every night and sleep in a real bed, and there is not one thing wrong with wanting that. I want you to hear me say that clearly. There is no wrong answer here, not this time. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. I'm scared of it, she admitted. Of the training. No, not the training. I'm not afraid of hard work. I've never been afraid of hard work. She struggled to find the words for the thing that had been circling her since the mountain. I'm afraid that if I keep doing this, keep picking up the rifle, keep being good at it, that eventually it changes me into the thing Whitmore warned me about, the person who stops feeling it. I'm afraid that the more I do it, the less it costs me, and the less it costs me, the less of me is left. I'm afraid of losing the part of myself that sat on those steps and shook, because that part hurts, but that part is the part that's still human. She looked up at him. Does that make any sense at all? Mitchell was quiet for a moment, and then slowly he nodded. More sense than you know, he said. I've watched it happen to men, watched them get hollowed out, and I've watched other men do this for 20 years and stay human the whole way through, stay soft in the places that matter, even while they got hard in the places they had to. You know what the difference is? What? The ones who stay human are the ones who are afraid of exactly what you're afraid of, Mitchell said. The fear you're describing right now, that's the thing that protects you from it. It's a compass. As long as you're afraid of losing that part of yourself, you won't lose it because you'll be guarding it. It's the day you stop being afraid of it that you're in danger. So this fear you have, this exact fear, it's not a reason to say no, Carter. It might be the best reason in the world to say yes. Because the program needs people who are afraid of the right things. God knows it's got enough people who aren't afraid of anything, and half of them scare the hell out of me. Evelyn sat with that. She thought about her father at the kitchen table, flexing his ruined hand, telling her that if a thing was worth doing, it deserved everything she had. She thought about the medics on the tarmac and the bar the color of ash and the useless feeling of standing there with a clipboard while other people did the thing that mattered. She thought about Whitmore, who had spent 40 years trying to send young people home alive, and how she had come home alive and what that had meant to him. She thought about Reed in good hands and whose hand is on the tool. She thought about 9 men on a mountain who were breathing because she had run into the open when no one else could. And she thought about the thing she had understood on the mountain in the moment Mitchell told her she had saved everyone. That her purpose had never been the numbers. That the precision, the focus, the stillness, the relentless attention to the small things, all of it had been preparing her whole life for a moment when everyone depended on her. Her talent was not a curse. She had spent a week afraid that it was. That being good at this would slowly unmake her. But sitting there across from Mitchell, the folder between them, she finally understood it differently. Her talent was not a curse, and it was not a gift either, not exactly. It was a responsibility. It was a thing she could do that most people could not. And there were people out there, good people, teammates, and strangers alike, whose lives might one day depend on whether she had said yes to this folder or walked away from it. Whitmore had spent 40 years unable to walk away because he could not bear the thought of one more young soldier not coming home when he might have taught them the thing that would have saved them. She understood him now. She understood him all the way down. If I do this, she said slowly, I need something. Name it. I need to be able to feel it every time. I don't ever want to get good enough at this that it stops costing me something. If I ever come back from something and I feel nothing, I need somebody to pull me out. I need that to be a promise, because the day it stops hurting is the day I'm done. That's my line. I need someone to hold that line with me. Mitchell looked at her for a long moment, and then he did something she did not expect. He stood up and he came around the table and he put out his hand. Not the way an officer offers a hand to a subordinate, but the way one soldier offers it to another, the way he had on the mountain. I'll hold that line with you, he said. You have my word, and so will Reed, and so will that old man out at the range. You won't carry it alone, Carter. That's the whole secret in the end. Nobody good does this alone. You find your people, and you hold each other's lines, and that's how you stay who you are. He gripped her hand. So, what do you want me to tell them? Evelyn stood. She thought about the safe life, the desk, the numbers, the reasonable hours in the real bed in the ordinary mornings. And she found that she wanted those things truly a part of her, ached for them. But she thought about the other thing more, the thing she had discovered on a mountain in the dark. The person she had found out there, the person who had been inside her the whole time, waiting since a kitchen table in Wyoming, since a quiet range at Liberty, since the first day an old marksman looked at a woman with a clipboard and saw something nobody else could see. She was not the woman behind the numbers anymore. She had never really been only that. and she was not going to spend the rest of her life pretending she was not, when there were people out there whose lives might one day rest in her good hands. She gripped Mitchell's hand back hard. "Tell them yes," she said. The word yes carried Evelyn Carter across an ocean and into the hardest months of her life. The Advanced Precision Program did not care that she had held a flank on a mountain. It did not care that her name was in an after-action report that colonels were passing around. On the first morning, the chief instructor, a lean, weathered man named Sergeant First Class Boone, stood in front of the new class and made that very clear. "I know some of you come in here with reputations," Boone said, and though he did not look at Evelyn, everyone else did. "I want you to leave those reputations at the door. In here, you have done nothing. In here, you are nothing but what you can prove today. Whatever you did before it bought you a seat, it did not buy you a single ounce of my respect that you earn every day, starting now." And Evelyn discovered over the weeks that followed that this was the hardest thing of all. Not the physical brutality of the program, though that was real. Not the sleepless nights, the punishing distances, the cold. The hardest thing was that everyone in that program was exceptional, and most of them had years of experience she did not have, and many of them looked at her exactly the way the SEALs had looked at her in that first briefing tent. "You're the logistics one," a big shooter named Vance said to her on the second day, not unkindly, just matter of fact. "The clerk, the one who got lucky on that mountain." "That's me," Evelyn said. "Lucky doesn't last in here," Vance said. "In here, it's not one night, it's every day. Different animal." "I know," she said. And she did know. And a part of her was terrified that Vance was right, that the mountain had been a single miracle, a thing that had risen up out of her once under impossible pressure and would never come again when she reached for it on demand. That fear followed her into her first real test and her first real failure. It was a stress shoot. Physical exertion, first running her body to exhaustion, and then the rifle, and then targets under time pressure with instructors screaming in her ears. And Evelyn, the woman who had held her center through an ambush and a crash and a firefight, fell apart. She rushed. That was the terrible irony of it. On the mountain, she had been slow and patient and perfectly still. And here in training, with no one shooting back, she rushed. She snapped her shots. She let the clock inside her run faster than her hands could follow. She missed targets she should have hit in her sleep, and Boone stood behind her, watching every miss, and said nothing, which was worse than shouting. When it was over, she stood there breathing hard, humiliated, certain she had just proven Vance right in front of everyone. Boone walked up to her. He did not raise his voice. "You know what your problem is, Carter?" "I rushed, Sergeant." "I know you rushed. I want to know why. Because I've read your file. I know what you did on that mountain. A person who can do that does not miss those targets. So why did you rush?" And Evelyn, standing there, made herself think about it honestly, the way she had learned to think about everything honestly, and the answer came up from somewhere deep, and it surprised her. "Because I thought I already knew how," she said slowly. "On the mountain, I didn't know anything. I had nothing but the basics, and I clung to them. I did every single thing Whitmore ever taught me because it was all I had. And in here, I've got the mountain behind me, and I thought that made me better, so I stopped clinging to the basics. I got ahead of myself. I thought experience made me better, and it made me sloppy instead." Boone looked at her for a long, long moment. "Say that again," he said quietly. "The last part." "I thought experience made me better," Evelyn repeated, "and it made me sloppy instead." And something in Boone's hard face shifted just slightly, the way Whitmore's face had shifted the very first day on the range at Liberty when a woman with a clipboard told him a man was flinching. "That," Boone said, "is the most important thing anyone in this class is going to learn. And you just learned it in week 2. Survival doesn't come from confidence, Carter. Confidence gets people killed. I have buried confident shooters. Survival comes from discipline. From doing the boring thing right every single time, especially when you think you're too good to need it. The day you think you've got this figured out is the day this kills you. You want to be great at this, then you stay a beginner forever. You cling to the basics like your life depends on them, because one day it will." He stepped back. "Reset, run it again, and this time be the woman who had nothing but the basics on that mountain. Be her. She's better than the one who thinks she knows things." Evelyn reset. She ran it again, and this time she slowed down. She went back to the beginning, to breathe in slow and breathe out slower, to the pause at the bottom of the breath, to belonging to the shot. She stopped trying to be the hero of the mountain and became once again the patient beginner who counted things. She did not miss a single target. And Boone, watching, did not smile, but he nodded once, and from Boone that was worth more than a medal. That was the turning she needed. From that day, Evelyn stopped trying to prove she belonged and started quietly, relentlessly to earn it the only way she had ever known how to earn anything. One small thing done right, and then the next, and then the next. She was not the strongest in the class. She was not the fastest. But slowly the others began to notice that she was the most consistent, the hardest to rattle, the one who never made the same mistake twice, the one whose focus simply did not break no matter what they threw at her. The qualities that had made her an extraordinary logistics specialist: the precision, the focus, the control, the near inhuman patience, the ability to hold 1,000 small details in perfect order and never let one slip, turned out to be the exact foundation of an elite marksman. They had always been the same skill. Whitmore had seen it the first day. Now the whole program was seeing it too. Vance saw it. The big shooter who had called her the lucky clerk found himself week after week watching a former logistics specialist outlast him on the long shoots, the ones that came down not to talent, but to who could stay still and focus the longest without cracking. And one evening near the end of the program, he sat down across from her in the chow hall the way Mitchell once had, and he said, "I owe you an apology." "You don't." "I do. I called you lucky. First day." He shook his head. "There's no luck in what I've watched you do these last months. Luck runs out. You never ran out. I've been doing this a long time, and I've never seen anybody hold focus the way you do. Where does that come from?" And Evelyn smiled, a real smile, maybe the first easy one since the mountain, because the answer was the same answer she had given Whitmore on a quiet range a lifetime ago. "My dad," she said. "He lost the use of his hand when I was a kid, and he never once let it make him bitter. And he taught me that the small things are the big things, that how you do anything is how you do everything. I spent years thinking that just made me good at counting supplies." She turned her coffee cup slowly in her hands. "Turns out it was making me good at this the whole time. I just didn't know what it was for yet." "Your dad know what you're doing now?" "He does," Evelyn said. "I called him, told him everything." Her voice caught just slightly. "He said that's my Evie. If it was worth doing, she gave it everything she had." She swallowed. Then he cried. First time I ever heard my dad cry. He said he always knew there was more in me than the numbers. He just didn't want it to push me toward anything dangerous, so he never said it. He said he'd spent my whole childhood watching me and thinking that girl could do anything she set her mind to, and being terrified I'd set my mind to exactly this. Vance was quiet. Then he said, "He's proud of you." "He's proud of me," Evelyn agreed, "and scared for me, both at once. I think that's just what love is when your kid does something like this. Proud and scared all the way down forever." She thought of Whitmore then, and of the letter he had sent her 3 weeks into the program, in his cramped old handwriting, the same handwriting that filled the notebook she still carried everywhere. He had written that Reed had come to visit him at the range just like she'd hoped, and that the two of them had sat and talked for 3 hours about her, and that between the two of them, they had decided she was the finest natural shooter either of them had ever seen, and that they had also decided not to tell her that because it would go to her head, and then he was telling her anyway because he was old and did what he wanted. She had laughed out loud reading it alone in her bunk, and then she had cried because she missed him, and because she understood now what an extraordinary thing it was to have an old man like that in her corner. He had ended the letter the way he ended everything. "Come home safe, Carter. Bring yourself back to me. That's an order." She kept that letter folded inside the notebook, right at the page that said the job you were given is not the same as the job that will be asked of you. Be ready for both. The program ended on a gray morning and Evelyn passed. Not just passed, she graduated near the top of a class of soldiers who had spent years preparing for something she had stumbled into on a mountain and then chosen with her eyes open to pursue. Boone shook her hand at the end, and he held on to it a second longer than he had to. "You know what the difference is between a good shooter and a great one," he said quietly. "A good shooter can hit the target. A great one can hit the target and still be a whole human being at the end of the day. I've made plenty of good shooters. I don't make many great ones. You're going to be a great one, Carter. Because you never let go of the part that hurts. Most of them try to cut it out to make the job easier. You carried it the whole way. That's the difference. That's the whole difference. He let go of her hand. Now go be who you're supposed to be. Months later, Evelyn Carter stood on a new battlefield. And she was not the same woman who had climbed into a helicopter at a forward staging point, clutching a borrowed notebook to her chest, terrified she had made the worst mistake of her life. She was not there to prove herself to anyone. She was not there for glory, and she had never been. She was there because she was good at this better than almost anyone, and because being good at it meant she could keep people alive, and keeping people alive was the only reason she had ever picked up the rifle in the first place. She carried Whitmore's notebook in her breast pocket over her heart the way she always did now. She carried her father's voice, telling her the small things were the big things. She carried the weight of the men she had stopped on that first mountain, and she had made her peace with that weight, not by making it lighter, but by understanding that it was supposed to be heavy, that the heaviness was the proof she was still herself. She carried Boone's words about staying a beginner forever, and Reed's words about good hands, and Mitchell's promise to hold her line with her. She carried all of it, and it did not weigh her down. It steadied her the way ballast steadies a ship, the way it kept her low and calm and human when the noise started. And when the noise did start, when the moment came, she did the thing she had been born to do and made herself do and chosen to do all at once. She controlled her breathing. She trusted her training. On the pause at the bottom of the breath in that little moment of perfect stillness, she had first found on a quiet range half a world and a lifetime ago, she belonged to the shot. And the people around her, soldiers who did not know her story, who saw only a calm, focused marksman doing her job, went home to their families because she was there. She never told them who she used to be. It did not matter anymore. The woman behind the numbers and the elite marksman were the same person. They had always been the same person. It had just taken a mountain and an old man and a rifle dropped on the rocks and 2 words screamed into the dark to show her. Because the SEAL team from that first night never forgot. Mitchell made sure of it. He told the story in the careful way that operators tell stories at reunions and re-enlistments, and quiet nights when men remember the ones who should not have made it and did. And every time he told it, he came to the same moment, and his voice always changed when he reached it, and the men listening always went still. There was a night on a mountain, Mitchell would say, when everything went wrong. When the helicopter went down and the enemy came from 3 sides and the sniper fell, and his rifle clattered onto the open rock and went silent. And a simple command echoed through the darkness, 2 words, the only 2 words that mattered. Rifle now. And nobody could reach it. Every man who could shoot was pinned. The enemy was closing. They had seconds to live. And then the person who moved, the person who ran into the open, into the fire and picked up that rifle and held the whole flank alone until rescue came, the person who saved every single soul on that mountain was not the seasoned operator anyone would have expected. It was the logistics specialist, the clerk, the woman behind the numbers who was never supposed to be there, who was never supposed to hold a rifle at all. She was not the soldier anyone expected. She was the soldier everyone needed. And on that mountain in the dark, with 2 words and a dropped rifle and a single act of impossible courage, Sergeant Evelyn Carter taught an elite SEAL team and every soldier who ever heard the story after a truth they would carry for the rest of their lives, that a person's worth is never decided by the title they are handed, but by what they choose to do in the moment when everyone is depending on them. And when that moment came for her, she rose. She did not flinch. She held the line. And she never let it change who she was. The reunion came 5 years later on a warm evening at Forward Operating Base Liberty, though by then it was hardly the same place and hardly the same Evelyn who walked back onto it. She came back a master sergeant. She came back with a career behind her that soldiers spoke about in low voices, the kind of quiet legend that gets passed from one person to the next without anyone quite knowing where it started. But that was not why she came back. She came back for one reason, and his name was Caleb Whitmore. The old man was retiring at last, truly retiring this time, not the half-retirement that had brought him to run a base shooting range, but the real thing, the kind where a man finally sets down the weight he has carried for 4 decades and walks away from it for good. He was past 70 now. His hands had started to shake just slightly, in a way that broke Evelyn's heart to see, because those were the steadiest hands she had ever known. They were throwing him a small gathering at the range, the place where it had all begun, and Whitmore had said he did not want any fuss. But he had asked for her, by name, The one person he had asked for. So she came. She found him exactly where she knew she would, out at the firing line in the last of the evening light, watching a young soldier struggle through a drill. He was older and smaller somehow, the way the very strong become smaller when age finally catches them, but his eyes were the same. When they landed on her, they lit up in a way that made the 5 years fall away in an instant. "Well," Whitmore said, "look what the Army made." "Master Sergeant Whitmore," she said, and her voice caught on it. "It's just Whitmore now, Carter. Or it's about to be. They're taking my range away from me tomorrow." He shook his head, but he was smiling. "Come here. Let an old man look at you." She went to him, and he took her by the shoulders the way he had that day before the mission, and he looked at her for a long time, and whatever he saw seemed to satisfy something deep in him. "You came back," he said quietly. "Every time. All these years. You kept coming back." "You made me promise," she said. "Bring myself back to you. That was an order you said." So it was. His eyes were wet, and he did not bother to hide it the way the old stopped bothering to hide things. So it was. They walked the range together as the light faded, and she told him about the years. Not the operations, not the details. Most of those she could not share and did not want to. But the human things, the soldiers she had trained, because that was what she did now more and more. She had become without quite meaning to what he had been. A teacher, a person who took young soldiers and gave them everything she had, one small thing done right, and then the next so they would come home. She told him that the first time one of her students came back from something bad and sat on a step and shook, she had known exactly what to do because he had once done it for her. "I told him what you told me," she said, "that the weight is the proof he's still human, that the day it stops hurting is the day to worry." She stopped walking. "I've said your words to more young soldiers than I can count, Whitmore. You're in all of them now. Everything you taught me, I've been passing it on. It just keeps going." The old man had to stop and press the back of his shaking hand against his mouth for a moment before he could speak. "You know," he said finally, "when you're my age and you've spent your whole life doing this, you start to wonder if any of it mattered. If all those hours, all those soldiers, all those lessons, if any of it stuck, or if it all just blew away behind you like dust." His voice was rough. "And then a woman you found reading a clipboard on your range walks back in and tells you that everything you know is alive in 100 young soldiers you'll never even meet, that it's going to outlive you by 50 years, that the dust you thought you were leaving behind was seed the whole time." He shook his head slowly. "You just gave a dying man the only thing he ever actually wanted, Carter. To know it mattered. To know it wasn't for nothing." "You're not dying," she said, alarmed. "We're all dying, Carter. Some of us can just see it better than others from where we're standing." He waved it off before she could protest. Don't do that. I'm not sad about it. I'm the least sad I've been in years standing right here. Do you understand what a gift that is? Most men my age are terrified. And I'm standing on my range at the end, looking at the best thing I ever made, and I am not afraid of one single thing." He gripped her arm. "You did that. You. So don't tell me I'm not dying. Let me be grateful instead." She could not answer. She just put her arms around the old man and held him, and he held her back, and the young soldier on the firing line politely pretended not to see the master sergeant and the legendary marksman standing there holding on to each other in the last of the light. They came the next day, all of them. Mitchell was the first she saw, and he was a commander now gray at the temples, but the tired eyes were the same, and they crinkled when they found her across the range. "Master Sergeant Carter," he said, drawing it out, savoring it. "God, that has a good sound to it." "Commander Mitchell," she said, "look at you. They gave you responsibility. Bold of them." He laughed a real laugh and pulled her into a hard embrace the kind soldiers share who have stood at the edge of death together and come back. "It's good to see you," he said into her ear. "It's real good. You have no idea how often I tell that story. The mountain. You. Every young officer I get, I sit them down and I tell them, and I always end it the same way. You want to know who's going to save your life someday. It won't be who you think. So treat everybody like they might be the one, because one day one of them will be." "You still tell it?" "I'll tell it until I die," Mitchell said simply. "It's the most important thing I know. And I learned it from a logistics clerk who wasn't supposed to be there." And then a voice behind her said, "2 shots." and Evelyn spun around and there was Reed. He walked with a slight stiffness in the shoulder that had been shot, and he would never shoot the way he once had. That was true, the wound had taken that from him. But he had found something else. He held up his hands, both of them, and grinned. "I teach now too," he said. "Turns out you don't need to be able to hold a rifle steady to teach a kid how. You just need the eyes and the knowledge. I spot. I instruct. I've made more shooters in the last 5 years than I ever could have made if I'd stayed behind a scope." He shrugged. "You did that too, in a way. Up on that mountain when I couldn't shoot, and I spotted for you, and it worked when you and me became one weapon between us. That's when I first understood a man could still be useful without the trigger. That's when I figured out what I'd do with the rest of my life." He put his good hand on her shoulder. "You gave me a whole life after that mountain, Carter. Not just the one you saved, the one I've lived since. I never told you that. I'm telling you now." Kowalski was there too, walking on the leg they had almost taken, walking on it fine, and Delgado and even the medic from the helicopter, older now, who had spent his career telling the story of the flank that held. They stood together, the survivors of that mountain, 5 years on, all of them alive, all of them living lives full of the ordinary things, the marriages and the children and the quiet mornings, all of it, every bit of it, because a woman had run into the open and picked up a silent rifle. And they had all come here to this range to see an old man off. But really, Evelyn understood they had come to close a circle. They gathered around Whitmore as the ceremony began, such as it was, a few words from a base commander, a plaque, the small formalities the Army uses to mark the end of a long service. And then it was time for someone to speak on behalf of all the soldiers he had trained, and everyone had assumed it would be some senior officer, and instead Whitmore himself stood up slow and shaking and said, "No, I want Carter to speak. She's the one. Let her speak." So Evelyn stepped forward in front of all of them, and she had not prepared anything, and she found she did not need to. "I want to tell you all who this man is," she said. "Not the marksman. You all know the marksman. I want to tell you who he really is." She looked at Whitmore. 6 years ago, I was a logistics specialist. I counted supplies. I was the woman behind the numbers, and I believed all the way down that that was all I was ever going to be. And I was fine with it. I had made my peace with being small. Her voice steadied. And this man looked at me one afternoon while I was doing an equipment count, and he saw something I could not see in myself, and he did not tell me about it. He did not flatter me or push me or promise me anything. He just started twice a week, hour by hour, drawing out a thing I did not know was there. He gave me his time when I had nothing to give him back. He gave me his notebook, 40 years of everything he knew when I walked into the worst night of my life. And when I came home from that night broken, when I sat on a step behind the supply building and could not stand up, this man sat down beside me and taught me the most important lesson of my entire life. He taught me that the hardest part of what we do is not the trigger. It's learning how to live afterward. And he taught me that the weight I was feeling, the weight that was crushing me, was not damage. It was proof that I was still human. She had to stop for a moment. The whole range was silent. "Everything I have done since," she went on, "every soldier I have brought home, every young person I have taught to shoot and to survive and to carry the weight without being crushed by it, all of it, every bit of it is Caleb Whitmore. It is his hands working through mine. He did not just make me a shooter. He made me a person who could do this terrible, necessary job and stay whole. And then he taught me how to give that same thing to others." She looked around at all of them, at Mitchell and Reed and Kowalski and Delgado and all the young soldiers who did not know the story yet. That is what this man built. Not marksmen, not weapons. He built human beings who could carry an impossible weight and stay human doing it. And that is going to outlive every single one of us in this range today. It is going to keep going long after we are all gone, because it is in me, and it is in everyone I have trained, and it will be in everyone they train. She turned back to Whitmore, and the old man was weeping openly now, unashamed. "You asked me once to bring myself back to you," she said, her own voice breaking at last. "Every time, as an order, and I always did. So here is the last one I owe you." She reached into her breast pocket and drew out the notebook, worn even softer now. 5 more years of being carried against her heart, the corners rounded almost to nothing, held together with thread she had restitched herself more than once. She held it out to him. "I brought it back. One more time. It's yours. I want you to hold it one more time before you go home." Whitmore took it in his shaking hands. He looked down at it, and then slowly he closed her fingers back around it and pushed it gently against her chest. "No," he said so quietly only she could hear. "It was never mine to keep, Carter. A thing like this, you only really own it by giving it away. That's the whole secret of it. That's the whole secret of everything in the end." He patted her hand where it held the book. "You keep it. And someday when you find the one the way I found you, some kid reading a clipboard on some range somewhere that nobody else is looking at twice, you give it to them and you tell them it came from an old man who believed in a woman when she couldn't believe in herself. And you tell them to bring it back to you every time, as an order." His eyes shone. "That's how it keeps going. That's how it never dies. You understand me?" "I understand you," she whispered. The same words, the same promise, the circle closing. "Say you understand me." "I understand you, Whitmore." The old man smiled the small, knowing smile she remembered from the very first day, the smile of a man who has found something valuable in a place nobody thought to look, and who knows now, at the end, that he was right about it all along. Caleb Whitmore passed away that winter peacefully in his sleep in a small house in a quiet town, an old man who had finally set down his weight and found it did not crush him after all. And at his service, the range at Liberty sent an honor guard, and Commander Mitchell spoke, and Corporal Reed spoke, and 100 soldiers he had trained over the decades stood in the cold and said goodbye to the man who had sent so many of them home alive. But it was Evelyn Carter who folded the flag, and it was Evelyn who stood at the graveside after everyone else had gone in the falling snow, with a battered notebook pressed against her heart, and made him one last promise. "I'll find the one," she said to the quiet ground. "I'll keep it going, you have my word." And she did. Years later, on a range far from Liberty, Master Sergeant Evelyn Carter would notice a young soldier doing an equipment count, a quiet one, a logistics specialist of all things who nobody looked at twice, who counted the ammunition other people fired. And she would watch the way this young soldier moved down the line, the way they truly looked at things instead of just glancing, and she would hear them murmur almost to themselves that a shooter on the firing line was flinching before the shot. And Evelyn Carter would smile a small, knowing smile, and she would walk over and she would say the words that had once changed her entire life. "Say that again." Because a person's worth is never decided by the title they are handed. It is decided by what they choose to do when everyone is depending on them, and by what they choose to pass on when their own moment has passed. Caleb Whitmore had known that, and he had given it to Evelyn Carter, and she would spend the rest of her life giving it to others on and on forever, an unbroken line of ordinary people who discovered when the moment came that they had been something extraordinary all along. And that is how a single act of courage on a dark mountain and a single old man's faith in a woman reading at a clipboard echoed forward across a lifetime and beyond. It never fading, never dying, always passing from one good hand to the next. That was the true legacy of the night someone shouted, "Rifle now," into the darkness. It was never really about the rifle. It was about who we choose to believe in and what we choose to become, and the gift we leave behind in the people who come after us. And that gift, once given, never ends.